A bright and good morning to everybody. We are on page 52 of the Hemshech, the series of discourses called Tafresh Tzadik Daled, which corresponds to 5694. The English equivalent in the Georgian and the Gregorian calendar is 1933. This is based on and with explanation on Hemshech Ayin Beis, which is the series of discourses that the Rebbe Rashab delivered and wrote in the beginning Tafresh Ayin Beis, which is the equivalent of 5612, 1912. But the discourse continued all the way through 1916, 1915. So we're on page 1144, what is it, 1147 and through 1149, and now we move to Hemshech Tzadik Daled on page 52. And what we're discussing is the following. Discussing the interface in its highest levels. All of Ayin Beis is about the interface, which for those maybe more familiar, the language is when we talk about Achdus Hashem, understanding the integration and the way we unite with the divine. We say Hashem Echad in the Shema. So it doesn't just mean there's one God, it means there's one reality. So how do we understand that? When God is so different and so antithetical to existence. So that's the interface. Here, we're focusing on, and we're concerned with the interface on the highest levels of the beginning of the process, so to speak. Even though, technically speaking, the process doesn't begin, Seder Ishtalshel is called the cosmic order, which is the process, does not begin until after the Tzimtzum, because that's where Seder Ishtalshel begins. But if you recall, the Friedrich Rebbe actually added one key line to the Rebbe Rashab. The Rebbe Rashab, Klol Seder Ishtalshel, the Rebbe Rashab said, back I think on 1144, or I'll look it up, no, even earlier, on 1141 rather. He said, Klolis Hishtalshlus, from the highest levels to the lowest levels, is defined by three levels: Yesh, Ayin, Yesh. The Friedrich Rebbe added, which of course is based on this, but he added the actual words that also Lamayla Seder Hishtalshlus. So that means even the states that are still in its primordial state, pre-Tzimtzum, also are part of this whole general process, because technically it starts from after the Tzimtzum, but conceptually, anything outside of Atzmus, anything but Atzmus is already the beginning of a process. So Yesh, Ayin, Yesh, Yesh being the absolute true reality of the divine, which is a non-existential reality, a reality that must be, a reality that is existence comes from within itself. And then everything else is already everything else is derived from there. So in this process, there's the Yesh HaNivra is the other end of the spectrum. That's the created Yesh, that's our existence. And in between, there's this channel or field of energy. We call it Oyer Ayin. It's called Ayin. And I already explained why it's called Ayin. And that Ayin breaks into two levels. One that relates more to the source, and one that engages more with the creation. So there's an actual logical progression and process going on that allows us to understand it and allows us also to retrace the steps and climb these stepping stones, climb the ladder, climb the mountain in a progressive and orderly fashion. Now, in Ur itself, he said, because Ur is not Atzmi, it's not the core essence, so therefore it's subject to levels, which is vital. You can't create an existence as we know it, which is structure and based on hierarchy. Everything is hierarchy. Everything in existence has a hierarchy, whether it's Daimim, Tzemei, Chai, Medaber, mineral, vegetable, animal and man and the person, whether it's intelligence, emotions, and the actions, and implementation, whether it's thought, speech, or action, whether it's Atzilus, Bria, Yitzir, Asiyah, everything. Existence, structure, and structure are one and the same. It's not like there's existence and then you put it into a structure. Existence, as we know it, is all about structure. So how can you create a structure logically when Atzmus is beyond any structure, beyond any definition for that matter? So the Eibishter made it a little easier for us to relate to. He said, I will extend and express myself in a structural form. It's called, it begins with Oyer. So there's no actual structure yet, but Oyer is subject to structure. Because Oyer, as opposed to the Etzem, Atzmus is indivisible, non-structured, no definitions. Oyer is not outside of Atzmus because it's all it is a reflection of Atzmus, but for all practical purposes, it's now Atzmus manifesting and beginning a Metzias Nimtza, which is defined by structure, if you remember, by time and space, whether it's conceptual or spiritual time and space or physical time and space. Bottom line is structure, meaning there's before and after, there's preceding, kdima v'ichur, some cause and effect, and everything has its quality, its level. Again, this doesn't necessarily mean physical. Even on a spiritual level, it's still a level. Chesed and Gvura may be both physically in the same place, not physically, but they're both different levels. So all this can begin to emerge once you enter the world of the field of energy, what we call Ur. That's why I'm calling it a field of energy. And this is where you have to go beyond the words you've so accustomed to. All of you have learned much Chassidus. You've heard Ur and stuff thousands of times. But I don't know if you ever gave thought what that is exactly. Everyone thinks Oyer is like sunlight because that's the only air we relate to. Sunlight, candlelight, daylight, that's the light we know of. You have to remember there's no such thing in the highest levels. There's no sun, there's no sunlight. It's a mushal. But it's a mushal to describe that something is manifesting in some form, in some extension, some type of revelation. Something has now move from Etzem to Gili. If you may remember, Etzem and Ispashtus is the best way to describe Oyer. Like it's not, with the sun, there's the sun and then the sun gives off light. It's something that you can call an extension. But for example, there's another one, the soul gives off light. It's not going outside of the soul, it's all within. So it's a Gili and Helam, you can call it sometimes, but different expressions we learned in the beginning of Ayin Beis, not relevant right now. For all practical purposes, we already spoke about Atzmus and its infinite distance from anything. But yet, Oyer, once Oyer emerges, Oyer is nothing but reflecting what Atzmus. And this Oyer, therefore, is subject to levels. When do the levels begin? Obviously not in the Etzem Oyer. They begin afterwards. But Etzem Oyer is now already turned into something that's a Metzias Nimtza, some type of existential reality. In a very subtle way, and it's not yet revealed. So we spoke about that higher level of Ayin, and then we talked about the lower level of Ayin, which relates to existence. Now, what I just said now is all from Ayin Beis. Regarding Tzadik Dalet, he hasn't yet gone to this two stages as I just described. All he said was that there are two. There's an Ayin Amiti that reflects the source, and he said there's the Ayin that relates to the Yesh HaNivra, that relates to existence. And he explained the idea, what I just described, the gradations and the hierarchy. And he gave the example of a flame of a torch. But to understand this, he said, to understand V'yuvan zeh, we'll understand it with the faculties of the nefesh, and he moves now to Ratzon. So we'll get back to this. I just wanted to put again in context. So he goes to Ratzon. I was thinking about this a bit more, and though I believe I explained it pretty well, if I may say so, but I want to add something that I think may help even more. Remember, one of the big chidushim of Chassidus over Kabbalah is that it gives us, Chabad Chassidus, gives us Mashalim. Alter Rebbe gave examples of from our lives, from our flesh, meaning not just our actual flesh, from our beings, from our bodies, from our souls, from our faculties, from everything we see around us, to be mamchish, to be able to understand godly concepts. Because a godly divine concept, a spiritual concept on its own, for a physical human being is not easy to begin to relate to. So the more we can find within our own selves, our own flesh, parallels, the better we can understand things. This is part, by the way, of climbing the ladder, of retracing the steps. You start with a mushal. The mushal is a keli and a lavush for the nimshal. It's not just an example, as it says in a number of places. It's actually the nimshal, the moral, as it manifests on a level that we can relate to. So when you give a child an example or an adult an example, you're not just giving a good example, it's actually the nimshal in the language of the child. So like it says, Dibra Teira B'Lashon B'nei Adam. The Torah speaks in the language of man. God doesn't have eyes or ears, yet it says, Vayishma, Vayar, God saw, God heard. Vayichar Af, God gets angry. Vayichar Af actually means that is fire from the nostrils. But it's all a mushal. But the mushal is a physical example of what is happening in Ruchnis. Now, Ratzon is something all of us can relate to because we all have a Ratzon. We have Ritzinus, we have desires, we have will, we have willpower. If someone were to speak about Oyer, we also have Oyer. Remember, the Frierdiker Rebbe gave the example of the Oyer HaChayis, of the Etzem HaNefesh, and the Chayis is a Chay Be'etzem, he said, which means that the energy of the soul to give life is an Oyer. So we can relate to that, but Ratzon is something even easier to relate to because all you have to do is try to analyze and dissect your own will. So will is an interesting state. On one hand, it is already some form of expression. I want something. As we explained yesterday, that desire by will, and we're going to go over it in a minute, no, actually, just say it right now. He defined Ratzon Mamish as what? Kishiyachpez be'ezadav, desire something, to the point that his nefesh is drawn to it. Literally, we're literally being drawn. So Ratzon is not a state, a static state within Etzem HaNefesh. Ratzon, some places says from the word merutza or the word rotz. Ratzon is an extension. You want something means you are drawn to something. And he inclines toward that thing. We're not neutral. The person is not neutral. He is inclining toward it, to attach to it, and to acquire it. That's the koyach. This is the inyan of the power of desire. So it's a very beautiful, powerful definition. What is Ratzon? The inclination and being drawn to anything, whatever it may be. We're not getting now what the object is, what it is that you want. Ratzon, by definition, is being drawn to something. We'll soon get to the next section. So Ratzon, therefore, in our own Ratzon by us, gives us some type of semblance, some type of sense. What's the word I want to use? Some type of understanding how Ratzon works by God. Now, as I said, God doesn't need Ratzon. He doesn't need anything. God wants to do something. Doesn't need the word Ratzon, doesn't need to be drawn to anything. Atzmus is Atzmus. But by manifesting in Oyer, which in turn, as we know in his pashtus, the extension of Oyer, it begins to manifest in our Ratzon, we have now something to hold on to. We could say, oh, God has a desire, I have a desire. Obviously, we have to make all the qualifications that God's desire and our desire are very different. We are wired a certain way. God wants to have a desire. He doesn't need to have a desire. Human being is very different. But the actual definition of desire is what? It's already an extension outside of your core. It's coming from your core, from your etzem, but it's an extension being drawn to something. That's Ratzon Mamish. We're talking the lower level. Remember, he said, I'll get to it in a moment, 2 levels of Ratzon. There's the Ratzon Goli and the Ratzon Nelam. Or Kayach HaRatzon and Kayach Ratzon v'Ratzon. So we're talking now the lower Ratzon. It's an actual desire, so it's not Etzem HaNefesh anymore, meaning it's coming from the Etzem, but it's being drawn to something, but it's not the something. It's not the koiches. It's not the actual faculties. The actual faculties, you can say, is already the way the Ratzon manifests to get whatever it wants to get. So there's a product. Let's talk. There's a yesh hanivra, which is what your goal is, the objective of the desire. The desire is the driving force, like he said. It's a controller. It compels the faculties in a certain direction. The faculties are like the instruments of the Ratzon uses to get what it wants, and then you get the final product. So Ratzon is a beautiful way of understanding interface. Remember, Ratzon is Keser. So what is Ratzon? It's already outside. It's already an extension from the etzem being drawn to something, like he said, it's going to control the faculties, whether it's Chabad, whatever the faculties are. And that's why he said it's removed from the faculties. So it's somewhere in between the etzem and the objective, and the object is the Ratzon. So you can almost say, I'm not going to say it exactly this way, but you could say the etzem is like the yesh amiti, the etzem hanefesh. The Ratzon is in the oyer, and it reflects what that etzem wants. And then you have the faculties, which are the specific faculties, whether it's intelligence or it's emotions or it's your sight or sound. And then there's the end result. So the point being here is that Ratzon is a very good example to understand what Ratzon means above. And that's how God did it. He didn't just extend the Oyer and said, Oyer, you create. Oyer shapes into Ratzon, into a desire. In desire itself, there's going to be levels. So we're right now in the beginning of the process, but we already learned about the levels in Ayin Beis, but not in Sadik Dalet. So I think that helps somewhat, because we can now use Ratzon as a handle. We can, if we haven't not understanding exactly how it is above, let's look at our own desire. And that's what we're learning now, what Ratzon is. And obviously it's here to teach us how Ratzon of God's Ratzon, God, the desire of God, functions and works exactly. So then the next step in this summary, I added now, just to help understand the whole thing. The next part, he says, now this Ratzon, in its pure form, is not driven by reason. I'm in the middle of page, a third down from the top of page 52. If anyone wants to follow the text, let me mention ayinbeis.com. Or the PDF of all these texts are there. You can check it out. You can look at it there. Okay, let me finish the summary. If anybody wants to ask anything, let's wait till I finish the summary before we continue. So he says, now, next point. Vihine, ha'atiyah v'hamshach. We learned this yesterday. I'm just summing up. This inclination, which is, it's even more than inclination. Atiyah means that it's going in a direction, v'hamshacha, and being drawn, and this being drawn. Shebekoyach haratzon. Shebekoyach haratzon. Okay. Hari einze mashabo mishum tam shel hasoga v'haskola. This ratzon that we're discussing here is not one that comes. Is not one that comes due to a reason, a logical or rational reason. To say that reason is the cause for the desire, because then you have to say that without the reason there would be no desire. So in that case, the reason becomes the cause, and the desire becomes the effect. But that's not desire as it is in its purest and original form. It says Eina inyan kain. That's not the way it is. And I explained, especially above, that's not the way it is. When it comes to human beings, we got to discuss that. Whether we have a Ratzon Atzmi and a Ratzon that comes due to a reason. But above, there's no reason. Reason is, actually, God wanted to have reason. So Ratzon precedes Tam, not Tam precedes Ratzon. So desire precedes. So he says, from his own essence, or what do you want? Mitzadatzme, let's not use the word essence. So mitzadatzme, it's coming not due to some other cause, some other reason. Hainu mashabeloy shum sibas tam, eza sheyeh, without any reason for whatsoever, any reason at all. He desires and he's drawn to the thing that he desires. So this is with this example. This is pure ratzon. Now, I'll just explain this a bit in the context I just said. Why is this so vital? It's very vital, because if we want to understand the ratzon, the highest levels, there's no tam yet. You're dealing with atzmus. You're dealing with
which line is it? I cannot find it. Which line?
Can someone help him? I mean,
just tell me from the top.
You want me to count, or you want me to tell you which line it begins?
About how is the Shura Mascheles?
I just read it. So, v'hainu masha b'leish shum sibas tam. Okay. The importance of this point is because when you learn about atzmus yashamiti, then we learn about oir. The oir breaks into two. Rotzen will emerge there. So if you bring tam into the picture, a reason, where does it fit? There's no reason yet. So this is vital that this rotzen still maintains a very pure flow straight from the oir, straight from the etzem. So it's mitzaratzme. It's not diluted with any cause. There's no siba for it. It's coming from the top down. That's the most obvious reason why he's making this point. But he's going to make now a qualification. And this is what we're in the middle of. I'm not going to say it's a maimer amuzgar. I'm not going to say it's a parenthesis, but it's definitely somewhat digressing into a subject which is clearly vital. But he's stepping away now for a moment about this Ratzon. He's saying, he's going to speak now about neshamas. That since neshamas come from the world of tikkun, or the way he says, neshamas yesh behem mailas tikkun, even better. They have the quality of tikkun, so therefore there's a hiskalulus, and we didn't finish this point. This is what we're going to learn now. But we did begin. So let me explain with the next step here. But before I do it, does anybody have any questions? Any questions? No. Okay, good. So now he's going to say, I'll read now. The line begins, Shahu Reitzeh. It's around almost a half down. So he says now, so we just established that Ratzon is not diluted by a cause, by a reason, by a logical reason. That's why Ratzon, Keser, is above Chachma. It's not Keser follows Chachma in the spherotic structure. If it was based on a tam, first you need Chachma and Bina and Das and then Ratzon, or Chachma and then Ratzon. Here we're talking about Ratzon that precedes it all. So he says like this: V'rak lies shanashamis yesh b'maylas hatikun. But due to the fact that neshamis, so he's talking now about souls. He's not talking about atzmus now or about godliness. Souls have the mile of tikkun. I'm going to sum up. I don't have to read the whole thing again. What's tikkun? Tikkun, the contrast, tikkun and toyu are two models. They can think of them as two archetypes. They're two models. One is a model of order, cooperation, coexistence, interconnectivity, and interaction. You can use all those words and don't use the word tikkun, and you have a perfect translation of what tikkun is. I did this intentionally because I see time and again, and I'm sure you recognize this too, when you get stuck in words, toyu tikkun, you immediately go into this knee-jerk reaction of the things you think toyu and tikkun are that you learned in your girsa diankasa, which means when you were younger, or whenever it is that you learned. And I find this, and I'm with all respect to myself and to everybody, when you get trapped in a word and you can't explain it in simple English, you most likely don't understand it. It's easy. Yeah, toyu tikkun, most people think toyu tikkun, and you want to learn toyu tikkun, of course. No, but I would ask you to challenge you, give me two models of toyu and tikkun in this reality, in our lives. So toyu is a model, in contrast to what I just defined as tikkun. Toyu is a model where there is no coexistence and no cooperation and no interconnectivity. Basically, if the human body was controlled by toyu, we couldn't exist. If nature was controlled by toyu, we couldn't exist. It's all symbiosis. Everything works with everything. In the human body, can you distinguish Yes, you could say there's a mind, there's a heart, there's a liver, there's lungs, there are legs, arms, the different thousands of different systems. But could you envision a human being where the systems are not interacting with each other? How many things interact just when you take one gulp of water in your mouth? How many forces are at work? How many parts of the machine begin to work together with each other? And should they, God forbid, not be coordinated, it can create disaster. So the 35 to 75 trillion cells in the human body, a healthy body, is a miracle. How could so many cells all work with each other? And even if one mutant cell, kind of havoc it would create. Same thing with nature. Can you distinguish between the whole world of Daimim, Sameh, Chaim, Medaber? It's all interconnected. So Toyu is the model of lack of coordination, lack of what we call hiskalus. Neshamis, he says, have the mile of tikkun. Neshamis are not toyudik, they're tikkundik, which means, like, I'll just read key lines here. Shehem hiskalus v'hiskashrus pnimi. There's an internal and innate, you can even say, an innate interconnectivity and connection. Toyu is anfin mispardin. That's called separate branches, diverging branches. Mispardin. V'tikkun ma'ilose b'hiskalus. And the ma'ila, the quality of tikkun is interconnectivity, not division, and but integration. V'shaychus kol ha'madrega zelazeh. All the levels are related with one another. So that's why it says, now since neshamis have this quality of tikkun, what impact does that have? So therefore, I'm reading again select lines of what we learned yesterday. That's why in the faculties of this nefesh, of these neshamis, I think I'm just going to read from here. The rest I'm going to read. Even though the faculties are different than one another, you can't compare. You can't say the power of vision is like the power of hearing, or the power of walking is like the power of talking, or that the mind is the intellectual faculties are like the emotional. They're very different. So even though they're mecholokim, which means separate, and muvdalim, mecholokim, different, diverse, and muvdalim, separate from one another, nevertheless, they have an internal, an integral connection and relationship. Yichus relationship. For who? The kol keach kelil, the kol mekeach zelase. Every faculty encompasses and is encompassed by another faculty. That's why by Svirus Eimer, what do we say? We don't just say chesed, gvura, teferes. We say chesed, sheba chesed, and gvura, sheba chesed, and teferes, sheba chesed, and all the way through. And then the next week, gvura, chesed, sheba gvura, gvura, sheba gvura, teferes, sheba gvura. And the truth is, it goes even more. There's chesed, sheba chesed, sheba chesed. There's gvura, sheba chesed, sheba chesed, which ultimately ends up being 100. So 10 times 7 emotions is 70. 10 times 10, 100 is 10 times 10. It comes out, when you three, it ends up being 1,000. The point is, hiskalulus is the key word. Everything encompasses and is encompassed. How many forces are at work right now when I'm speaking to you right now? And when you're listening to me? Your ears are there. Your mind is working. You're processing. Same thing with me. There's a bunch of forces always at work, and they're all interconnected with each other. This is the way, this is the structure of the faculties in their core essence. Again, it's not a superimposed reality. It's not like, okay, we have faculties. It's like somebody has a bunch of fragmented, disjointed pieces, and someone else is going to come and I'm going to connect them. That's not be'etzem mahusam. That's like you go ahead and you take a bunch of random pieces and you connect them. The fundamental nature and existence of the faculties is their being encompassed one by another. So it's not chesed was here, gvura was here, teferes is there, and then somebody tied them together in a package. their whole way they manifest in a healthy way is what he calls here. And now he's going to quote from Tanya. The Pei Gimel, chapter 3 of Tanya. And now he says, which is the shalosh elu? Nefesh, roch, neshama. So the neshama has parts, nefesh, different dimensions, nefesh, roch, neshama. He says all of these three, klula me'eser, they're encompassed, they consist of, and they comprise from klula, they're comprised of 10 levels. Keneged eser spheres alyenis, which are parallel and correspond to the 10 higher spheres, shenishtal shlumehen, that evolved, the koiches evolved from those spheres, as I explained yesterday. And they break into two, the Alter Rebbe says, hanechlokis l'shtayim. They break into two categories, these 10 faculties. Shein sholish ames, v'sheva kfules. This is the 3 ames and the 7 kfulis. In the letters of the Ayin Beis, you have exactly that. So it's 3 and 7. So Shalosh Ames is referring to the aim, the mothers. They're like the general categories. And Kfulis is the way letters are pronounced. So in Sefer Yetzirah, he says, there's Shalosh Ames and Sheva Kfulis. You need me to explain this? I might as well, since he quotes it here. Let me read it to you inside, actually. I have it right here open. I wanted it, 1 second. I'll read it inside.
The imois is clear, but the kfulos is not clear.
Huh?
The imois is clear,
Imois,
but the
what did I say? Not amos, imois.
imois, but the kfulos is not clear to me.
Here, I'll read it inside from Sefer Yetzirah. 1 second. I just here we go. Okay, it says like this. Actually, it's from Tikkunei Zeir and a few places in Kabbalah. So, like a mother who is the source of, who gives birth to children, so there are 3 levels. And the 7 are called kfulis. Here's how it works. When we pronounce a letter, you can pronounce it b'ofen rakes and koshes. Like, for example, a hey, the letter hey, it could be a silent hey, and it could be a loud hey. Like, you could say, for example, when you say raka. So the hey is more or less, you don't really hear it. When you say hayesh or ha'adam, the hey is kosher. So kfulis means that there's 2 ways to pronounce it. One is a strong and one is a weak way. So basically, the Kabbalah speaks about the 3 ames, and the 3 imes and the 7 kfulis. And that's where the root of the spheres are. The 3 imes are chochma bina das, and the 7 kfulis is chesed through malchus. Okay. Not sure why he's bringing this, why this is necessary to be brought here, but since he quotes the Tanya, might as well spell this out. I'm just looking if there's anything relevant here. Okay. Essentially, he says that when it comes to the 7 middas, there's 2 ways of expression. It could be a stronger expression, it could be a weaker expression. The 3 imais, which is chochma bina das, is only one form of expression because it's the root. It's not relevant to our discussion, but since he brought from Tanya, that's what it says in Tanya. Okay. Pirish. So I think continues from Tanya. Chochma bina das v'shivus yimei habinyan. The three is Chochma bina das. Okay, usually translated as wisdom, understanding, and knowledge, but it could also be conception, comprehension, and conclusion. V'shivus yimei habinyan, the 7 days of structure. It's usually the reference to the 7 days of the week, but in general, that every structure is made up of these 7. Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes, Chulu. V'kach b'nefesh Adam. And the same thing is b'nefesh Adam. This is all the language of Tanya, I believe, right?
Yes.
I want to see till where it goes. Yeah. So this is the language in Tanya. He's continuing. Same thing as nefesh Adam. So just like the spheres are made up of 3 and 7, same thing, the koiches nefesh, the faculties, which evolve, nishtalshul, they evolve from the spheres, also break into these 2 categories. Shenechlekes l'shtayim, it breaks into 2 categories. Seichel umidus. Seichel and midus. Ha-seichel koyelel, still all the language from Tanya. The seichel encompasses chochma bina v'das. Seichel encompasses the first 3, chochma bina das. V'amidus hein avos Hashem upachdei v'yirosei ulefare. He only spells out the first 3. It's avos Hashem, love is chesed. Upachdei v'yirosei is awe, fear and awe of God. Ulefare is glorifying, beautifying, exalting God. That's what he says there. Avos Hashem, the pachdei v'yirosei ulefare. Yeah. That Atkan, the lashon of Tanya. He doesn't continue. In Tanya, he says that Chacham bin Das nikre Imois umokel lemidus, and the midus are the like the offspring of the Chacham bin Das. So I'm just looking here. Yeah, good, fine. Now he's continuing. He brought the Tanya to establish his skalulus. The word klula, that's the operative word here. Klula, that it's kolol. Kolol means not just that it encompasses, but it's all interconnected. She says, Haridekachu binyanim shalakeches. So he's using the Tanya to make the case that this is the structure of the faculties. V'hainu, the li is the esesphiris elyenis. He's explaining, being that the supernal 10 spheres, hein b'bchinas iskalus v'iskashus pnimi, are in a state of, we said, integral, innate interconnectivity and connection, not like Toyu separate. B'chol hamadreges in all of its levels, the spheres. L'chein hinei gam b'keches hanefesh. That's why also the faculties of the nefesh, which evolve from the 10 spheres. So we don't just have chachma bina das. We also have the iskalulus of the spheres. The nasa odam b'tzalmenu kidmusenu. So also the faculties where the human being was created in the image and the likeness of God, meaning of the spheres of Adam Elyon, the eser keches hanefesh he mishtalshlim eser spheres elyenis, the 10 faculties of the nefesh, of the spirit, the human spirit, evolve from the 10 higher spheres. L'chein hinei ba keches. That's why also in the faculties, just like in the spheres, hinei binyanim hu b'eifun kazeh, their structure is in this manner. Asher kol koyach kolol v'kelel mekeyach zulase. That every faculty in kolol is encompassed of v'kelel and encompasses its neighboring or other faculty.
Does it mean includes mamish within it?
1 minute. Let me finish explaining. 1 second.
Okay.
Interestingly, by the way, here it reverses the order. Before he said koyach kelel v'kolol, now he says koyach kolol v'kelel. Not sure why, but I just wanted to point that out because I it says here before he said first he said the expression that it encompasses and then it's encompassed by. Here he says kolol. It's encompassed by, and it's encompasses. I want to correct something I said a moment earlier. I said the operative word here was klula in Tanya. It's more than that. It's not just klula me'eser. That's one key word. But it's also, he wants to make the relationship between, remember, neshamis from tikkun. Where's the jump? You could say the spheres and atzilus are iskalus. Tikkun compared to toyu. How do we know that it's down here below the same way? Maybe the connection gets somewhat somewhat severed in the process. It says no. Based on Tanya, the koiches hanefesh of the neshama down here are nishtalshalu. They evolve from the 10 spheres, and that's why just as the spheres are tikkun and interconnected, so too the koiches are interconnected. So the word klula is important, yes. Nefesh ruach neshama klula me'eser b'chinas connected eser spheres. So it's klula, but the reason is because the spheres are that way. So the neshama basically has the quality of tikkun. We still have to get to the punchline, what he's leading to, but that's what he's right now made the statement, that just as the spheres are all interconnected, and be'etzem, be'pnimius, be'etzem uhusam, so too the fundamental structure of faculties is a coordinated one. Not a chaotic one, it's a coordinated one, it's not just coexistence, it's cooperative, and each complementary is another word I would use. They complement each other. They all need each other, and they all need to be individual. As he said before, they're distinct, but they're completely working as one unit. You don't say you're a human being made up of millions of parts. You're one person that it consists of parts all working together like one beautiful coordinated symphony.
A glorious union.
Harmony within diversity. One second. Okay, you wanted to ask something?
I thought my impression about the kugel, the kogel, means that each mida, each sphere, each emotion includes within itself everything, and that's because it's total parts of is that fashion, its whole makeup is that way. Therefore, he's able to work together with everything else, not necessarily in interconnectivity on the external level.
On all levels. On all levels. He says, Asher kol koyach, kolol v'koyel mekayach zulase. Every faculty is kolol, meaning encompassed in another, and encompasses the other.
Includes
on all
inside.
levels. Distinguishes. It's be'etzem uhusam. It's their whole way, the structure of these, the makeup of these faculties. That's how it works, just as it is with the spheres. Not sure what.
Okay, I didn't hear that from what you're saying. That's what I was asking. Okay.
Be'etzem uhusam. I keep saying it. Be'etzem uhusam binyanam. I keep saying it's integral, pnimi, not superimposed. I've said this a number of times. Okay.
Must have missed it. Thank you.
It's the pshat here. It's not explanation. He says it explicitly. He says binyanam shalakeches be'etzem uhusam. That's the language he uses here. Okay. Continuing. Avol zeh einoi inyan sheyeh siba. Even though we just said that they all work with each other, and a perfect example, as I said before, we talk about eye and hand coordination. What's eye-hand coordination? They know how to work with each other. They're very different faculties. Or eye and ear coordination. Or anything. The coordination and the cooperation and the interconnectivity is fundamental to the whole structure of a human being. As I said before, it's not details that were bound together. They are structured, one machine, one entity, made up of many parts that all working with each other perfectly. As a matter of fact, all technology and all machinery and all appliances is trying to emulate and copy the human body and nature, to have many parts working toward one goal. So when you look at a machine, you look at a clock, whether it's a digital clock, whatever, everything has all these different pieces working perfectly. And if they don't, it will compromise or even destroy the machine. But here we're talking, obviously, the natural human being. When you go into and study a little neurology or any type of medicine, it's beyond amazing how this works. I mean, now with the coronavirus and people had, God forbid, respiratory issues, how does the brain work? What makes your breath go exhale and inhale in such a smooth way? It's not just the functions of your mouth and your throat and your lungs. It's connected to neurological activity. There's so much coordination going on in every move that a person makes that when we're healthy, we take it for granted. We don't even realize. But when you break it down and a person, God forbid, is struggling and no one should know of it, you suddenly realize. I was looking at, remember the ventilators were in the headlines. So I went to see, what is a ventilator exactly? We all think of ventilators like an air conditioner or something. It ventilates. No, it's one of the most complicated machines. It has to take over, how many processes? How expensive these machines are? Because you're trying to create man-made a machine to replace a God-made body that works so perfectly in a natural and healthy way. And you start realizing, wow, how many parts have to work together? You can't imagine. And if one little thing is off, doesn't matter if 99% is intact, the whole thing won't work properly. I mean, I'm not going to go into here all the details, but take any example. Look at the human eye. I mean, even simpler things. Just the coordination is impossible even to describe. When it says binyan shalkeches be'etzem uchusan, it's not just, as I said, it's not like I'm taking two pieces of paper and I glue them together. No, that's not at all how it is. The whole structure, which is the miracle, of course, of birth and life, and for that matter, all life, not just human life, the whole structure is such that it all works together. Look, conception upon conception, there's one cell. One cell results from the fertilization of an egg by a seed. The cell will split into two, and then into four, and then into 8. And that, in some strange, mysterious way, is going to turn into the human body. And you see it. You can see the development of the fetus through pregnancy. What emerges first, and then the rest, the head, how large it is, and then the rest of the body. So it didn't start with a bunch of pieces and then someone stuck them together. Exact opposite. It starts as one cell. So if you think of it in the Ruchnius, akudim beklei echad, 10 energies in one container, not 10 containers, and not all over the place. It all starts with one singularity. And that singularity will break down to pieces. So it's obvious then that every part has from everything else because they all started together. So even in a very natural way, you see this type of connection. Yes, of course, God can do a miracle. He can take together a bunch of disparate parts and disjointed pieces and make something out of it. But that's not how he did it. He made it in a way that we can understand its unity, its fundamental unity. This is why it's so shocking for those that think about it and are in tune when they see Pirud. When you see how the Rebbe responds to Pirud, to God forbid, Machlekes. It's because, I was just reading a few things from Hecholtzu, the Rebbe giving out a Choltz. I mean, the way the Rebbe describes his repulsion by Pirud, you could see, because Pirud is Hepech HaTeva. If the whole human race came from Adam and Chava, and everything came from one God, like he says in Tanya, Perek Lamed Beis. So how is it possible that these pieces argue with each other? How could they disagree? No, not disagree. How could they fight? Good. They're diverse pieces. But like the Yerushalmi says, the right arm would never hit the left arm of the same body. So of course the answer is the big tzimtzum concealed this connection. But if you think about it, it is completely not counterintuitive, completely irrational. It would be like the body turning on itself. If you hurt someone else, you're hurting yourself. You're all part of one bigger picture. But that's how deep the darkness is, that we don't see it, we don't feel it, and we can convince ourselves that I'm right and you're wrong, and to the point that people can actually kill another person. Physically kill or emotionally kill. Which, if you think about it from the perspective of the top down, Achdus, how does from Achdus come such this? It would be like saying that the whole human body started turning on each other. It's one of the worst autoimmune, one of these worst diseases when the body starts rejecting itself. Anyway, I just wanted to make the point that 3 weeks, of course, is always a theme of Achdus versus Sinas Chinam. So the symbiosis, the harmony, isn't just, as I said, a bunch of parts, you stuck them together, now work together. They began together, they're each encompass each other, each one has everything else in it, and every one has the other in it, and every other has that one in it. Like he says, kolol v'kelol. Okay. Nevertheless, now comes the second half of the story. Says, remember he said before that Ratzon Tam is not a reason for Ratzon. So he's going back now to that idea. Says this is skalalus that the shamas have of tikkun, that they all interact, is not called a siba. Doesn't mean they're a cause, like he explains. Shenemar, as if to say, in other words, it's not as if to say, that the revelation, the expression, the actualization, I should say, of a faculty comes as is caused by, or besibas, comes as a result of, or besibas due to the cause of another faculty. It's not one faculty causing another faculty, just because they're kolol zebazeh, says, so it's not due to the fact, besibas koyach hakolol by. The fact that a faculty has within it another faculty, kolol, interconnected, interwoven, that's not a sibah. V'cheinu b'rotzen. And the same is with rotzen, shehurak mitzad atzmei. The same is with rotzen, that it's mitzad atzmei, not mitzad atam. Okay. Let me explain what he's saying here. It's an interesting way of going to explain it. I'm a little surprised at the punchline. I thought it would be a little different, but forget about who thinks what. You know, we have to follow what the Rebbe says here. Basically, he's saying that the fact that all the faculties of a human being work with each other and are interconnected and kolol and koilel does not mean that one is causing the other to be that way. So he's saying, same thing with Ratzon. It's one of the faculties. Yes, it works with the other faculties. It actually commands them what to do. But the fact that just because it works with the others, and it's kolol and koilel of the others, that's what it looks like he's saying, does not say, however, in other words, seichel could be kolol within Ratzon, but it's not a sibah for Ratzon. It's not the cause for the desire. That's what he's saying here. I would still continue, I would still wait before we finish because he's going to say more about this. Why did he need this whole explanation to say that? Why don't you just say Ratzon on its own is just pure and undiluted and not affected by Seichel? I think what's bothering the Frierdiker Rebbe was because Neshamis, he said that was the first. He's basically qualifying, so doesn't his skalus seem to be like a sibah? Since Ratzon and Seichel work hand in hand, and the Ratzon is kolol in the Seichel, and the Seichel is kolol in the Ratzon, so how could you say that the Ratzon is not affected by the reason? That's what it sounds like he's trying to qualify. He says, no, skalus does not mean sibah. That's how I understand this, at least at first reading. This is not uncommon. The Frierdiker Rebbe does this a lot. He analyzes something all the way, every aspect. So basically, skalus is not sibah. Okay. But he's not finished. He said, Now he says like this.
Before you go, is there any examples of pure Siba? Because even in science, it's very hard to get Siba anymore. Maybe it's just something that it was always used in Chassidus, so we can hang our hat on it, but it's not, and it's not real except for the ultimate cause, the Abishter, and it's not, everything's coordinated and this and that, but it's not. Siba, it seems like just something that that God gives us to hang our hats on in the meantime. I don't know.
Look, my thinking is like this. I have a few other questions as well. That's why I want to finish the topic before I try to analyze it. Because, for example, when you say Moichen gives birth to Amida, you contemplate on the greatness of God, and then you are drawn with attraction to want to love God. There you do say that the Moichen is a Sibba to the Midas. It's not only a Sibba, it gives birth to them. But I don't think he's talking about that here. He's talking here about the Hiskalalus, that when you do a Midah, every Midah has Seichel in it, and every Seichel has a Midah in it. And he wants to say that the fact that the Ratzon may end up having a reason, and that reason may be encompassed it, but it's not driving the Ratzon. That's what it sounds like. But I don't want to jump to a conclusion. I'd rather want to finish the subject here, and then we'll go back to it. For some reason, he wants to distinguish between Iskalus and Sibba. But he didn't say anywhere that Ratzon has Iskalus with the Keiches. He spoke about the Keiches, but it seems like he's saying that, because right now, the 10 Ratzon, you can say, is not even part of the Keiches, because we said before, Ratzon compels the Keiches. If anything, Ratzon is a Sibba for the Keiches, not the other way around. So I'm not sure why he's going here to make a case. We already said Ratzon is above all the faculties, and it's like an authority. He said that clearly. What was the lashon he said? Anyway, I'd rather read a little more before I come to any conclusion. Let's see, what does he say next?
It's revelation from Ratzon necessarily more than a Siba.
I think the bottom line that he wants to say is that the faculties, as much as they're interconnected, yet each one has their distinct properties. So interconnection does not mean one causes the other. Interconnection means they all interact and work with each other, and they're all encompassed one another. That's what he says. The same thing you could say with Seichel. Even if Ratzon says, I want to use the mind, but Ratzon didn't give birth to the mind. The mind is a creation of God. So every one of the faculties, Chochmah through Malchus, has its own personality. However, they are not distinct and separate, like separate branches in Toyu. They are all interconnected. But interconnected does not mean one caused the other. I think that's what he wants to say. Moichen did not. A mind can give birth to an emotion, but a mind does not create emotions. God, in creating the human being, created Chachma, Bina, Das. None of them are an outgrowth of the other. Even Bina, which is explaining and comprehending Chachma, we know Bina has its own root, as Chachma does. I think that's what he's trying to say here. That though they completely work together hand in hand, they each have a mitzad atzmei. Each of them has its own distinct identity that works with the others and very closely works with them, encompassed and completely like one entity, but they're not, one does not cause the other. I believe now that I think about it, that's what he wants to say.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like. We'll stop here because it's a good place to stop. So close to the bottom of page 52 in Tzadik Dalet, and we'll continue tomorrow. Okay.